Please give a warm welcome to directors Justin K. Thompson, Kemp, director Kemp Power, producer Amy Pascal, and producers, writers Phil Lord and Christopher Miller.
Oh, that's
Thank
nice.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. I'll start with Phil and Chris. Did you guys intended to, I mean, you're obviously expanding the definition of what we know as animated storytelling. Was that something that was in your heads when you were thinking of doing this sequel?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been our ambition to try and push the envelope and sort of kick down the door of what people think is possible for a studio animated film. The only limitations in animation are your imagination at this point. And so, when we made the first film, it was its brand was innovation. It was something new, and the idea of doing a sequel that's just more of the same seemed like it would be a big disappointment to everyone. So we all had a lot of pressure on ourselves making this movie to go like, how can we do something that's totally new again, that is something that people haven't seen before, but still gives them a full, beautiful story about the characters they love so much.
I think for us, every film is an experimental film, and I think that goes back to like the beginning of like cinema history, and animation history and cinema history are intertwined. And we try to, we came up, making films under a Bolex, like duct tape to the floor, like the idea that that an animated film would ever be like regressive is like weird to us. They're all so bold, so we're always trying to make our feature films feel as experimental and fresh as animation is. It's like we're always setting out to like make Fantasia or something.
Amy, when I introduced the film, I mentioned that you greenlit the original Spider-Man movies. You're like the mother of all spiders.
Yes, I'm old enough to be the mother of all spiders.
And I'm curious for you to, from your perspective, the evolution of the Spider-Man franchise and the fact that where Chris and these two gents, Lord Miller, have taken it. Well,
When I decided that I wanted to do the live-action movies in the Marvel universe, because we had done a lot of movies about Spider-Man without that universe, in addition to making a deal with Marvel to do those, I came to these two and said, would you guys ever do a Spider-Man movie? And they're like, no. And I said, well, what if we did something really different? What if we did an animated movie? And they thought about it for 10 seconds, and then they said, if we can do Miles Morales and we can do the Spider-Verse, then we will do it. And that was just the beginning of a whole other way of telling Spider-Man stories. And I was really lucky that they were the two people I came to.
And Kemp, and the fact that you're a newcomer to this universe, can you tell us what was it like? The fact that this is a continuation of the story, but working with returning talent, but then with newcomers.
Well, I mean, for me, this was a whole new thing. That's why I wanted to do it. I kind of had this. It's funny when you have personal rules. It's funny how quickly the universe like makes you break them. And I kind of had this like no sequel rule. Like I don't want to do sequels. And then when I met these guys, I saw the first Spider-Verse while I was still in production on Soul, the last movie I was working on, and it was Oh, thank you.
Okay, you guys, he directed Soul. Yeah. He's being very modest.
But like I saw the film before it came out in theaters and met Phil and Chris as well as Justin and Joaquin like right before Soul wrapped. So I ended up working on Spider-Verse. I think we wrapped Soul on a Friday, and on Monday I was secretly in production on this film. And so I was working on Spider-Verse 6 months before Soul came out in December of that year. And what really drew me in was just when they pitched it, I was just like, it's characters I know, but it's a story I don't. You know, it wasn't like, let's just take this previous movie and add 30%. Let's just take this previous movie. It was all these unexpected twists and turns, original twists and turns, and it felt so original. It felt like I was having an opportunity to do a completely new movie, not a sequel, if that makes any sense. And that's really what kind of drew me in, because for me, it's like, in my mind, every movie I make is my last movie. And when I say that, what that means is, as a creative, you put everything, you leave everything on the floor. You know, like there's no holding an idea for later. It's like, and this was a team of people who just kind of like put everything on the floor, left everything on the floor, as though like when this movie ended and we were done, we were all gonna die. But that's what makes you push, I think, as hard as our whole creative team pushed when we made this film.
And Justin, the fact that there's 3 directors, how did you guys divvy up the task, or it was all hands on deck at once?
Well, I mean, it was actually a lot of fun, to be honest, and it was kind of such an amazing and daunting challenge to try to make a film as big as this, that we really just needed more talented people to make a movie of this scale and this size, that was going to stand up, but also stand alone from the first film in the way that it does. And so you had to have someone who was an incredible writer to tell a story like this. You had to have somebody who was an incredible animator and camera person, like Joachim, who's not here today, but we love him. He's in Ohio. And then you had to have somebody who was really good at like putting incredible visuals on screen. And I was, at my background as a production designer, I was looking to move into directing because I've always been a storyteller. And I think what made what I do different from maybe what I always try to do is I always try to look at visuals as a way to externalize what's going on with a character. And here was an opportunity with this story for the first time. I think, like you get ideas that you grow up with from a time you're first starting out as an artist, and you're like, wouldn't it be cool someday? Wouldn't it be cool someday? But my respect for story was so strong that I never wanted to superimpose my wish list onto anything that didn't deserve it. But here, and I was like getting these other, I'm gonna go over here, because I had done the first movie with these guys, and I was like, I don't wanna just do the same thing, guys. But they said, what if we had the most incredible team of people and the most incredible story that had nothing, it could be informed by the first movie, sure, but really was its own story. And here was this kid who was now 15 years old, who was, we didn't know, we had to reintroduce him to the audience at 15 and the things that he's going through. And this darker version of this character's journey, where he has to learn about going after your friends and your parents giving you the opportunity to go out and make those mistakes, but learning how hard those mistakes and how hard those betrayals can really be and that story deserved to be told, and it was its own story. And then it started my brain going about what we could put on screen to support that visually. And I started talking to Kemp, and I started talking to these 3 who I'd already made multiple films with, and said, could we possibly do this craziest thing where like the walls start dripping and like paint starts like animating on screen, and could the colors change behind the character because somebody's mad, or could it get blue, could it turn blue because somebody's sad, or could we actually break down the film into the elements of comic books that we had established on the first film, but then go so much further with it in a way that was expressive of all these different these different characters, and the idea that we had like all these other worlds to go to that could also express themselves in their own ways, I suddenly found myself then seeing the excitement they had and the excitement that Kemp had and the excitement that Joaquim dos Santos had to tell a different story that hadn't been done before in a way that I just kind of felt like I had to stay and make sure I got it to the screen.
Kemp, one of the thrilling things about the film, one of the many thrilling things on the film, is that so many races and cultures are represented in the film. Can you tell us about working in that with that environment?
I mean, it's funny because I don't really have to put that much thought into that element of it because it's just the world outside my window. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. There's words like inclusion that get thrown around a lot these days. But one thing that I'm very averse to is tokenism. If a character's there, there's no characters who are just there for window dressing. Every character has an arc. Every character has a story. And that story contributes to the story of our main character, which is Miles Morales. So Miles was the foundation, you know, and he already had a great mythology built around him from the first film that it was very clear where we wanted that story to go. And honestly, I mean, when you look at the crew, we had 1,000 people work on this film. And if you look at the crew, our crew represents the world, you know? And one of the wonderful things about the medium of animation and when one makes an animated film is that we encourage good ideas to come from everyone, you know? So it's like we decided where we wanted Miles to go. That dictated what characters we were gonna add into the film. And then our very crew kind of contributed to like making sure those characters felt like they really represented the worlds and the cultures that they were supposed to represent. And I think that, you know, I mean, even looking out into this crowd, like this is Santa Barbara, which I haven't been here that many times. So for me, I was like, oh, Santa Barbara, it's gonna be a theater full of white people. And I'm like, oh shit, look at all these people of color. Like, it's awesome, you know what I mean? Like, it's, the reality is the world is not as monochrome, you know, the world is not a monoculture. There's nowhere in the, you know, it really isn't. You know, you can go to even places that are called, you know, monocultures really aren't that. And I think with the crew that we have and the team that we put together, it was kind of impossible not to have that, the diversity of that world just naturally represented. It doesn't feel, it shouldn't feel forced. You guys tell us, does it feel forced at all? Because it really shouldn't. And that's because, I mean, do you guys know that Phil's like half Cuban? Like, people don't even, like,
I'm
we all
hiding in
represent
plain
those,
sight.
Yeah, we represent all those cultures. Joaquim's from Portugal, you know, Chris is from Seattle. That's like another country.
It's like
what do you?
It's another
grunge music. I mean, one quick story about that is that you know we wanted Miles to go to Mumbattan, sort of a Spider-Man India world, because we wanted something that was more colorful and outrageous and wild and loud and crazy, so that he could have his sort of we're not in Kansas anymore moment. And Spider-Man India comics were a thing, and so we were like, oh, we should use this character. And as we were developing him and he was in the story, he was just okay as a character, and the scenes weren't that great. And a team of Canadian, Indian American animators got together and emailed us and said, we think that this character can be better. He's not good enough yet. And here are the ways that we think he can be more specific, and here are the things that we think feel too generic, and this thing doesn't seem cool enough. And you know, we were pretty deep into production at that point, and you can either go like, no, it's fine, you don't know what you're talking about, and it's too late, or you can embrace it and go like, we need to make this movie the best it can be. And so we put together a room of Indian and Indian American writers, did a whole day, completely rewrote all of the scenes with him in it. And in one day, we had like, the next day, we had completely rewritten the scenes, got into storyboards, put a new thing, and then it became a lot of people's favorite part of the movie.
That's great. Amy, Miles' storyline mirrors Spot's, you know, the villain.
That's very true.
Can you tell us about developing Spot and that parallel storyline?
Well, I think the thing about all good characters is that they want something that we all understand. And the villains in our movies, the antagonists, have to want the same things that the protagonists want. So what Spot has is literal holes inside himself that need to be filled. And everybody, dramatized that in a really funny way, but also it was really emotional and really meaningful. And the same thing was true for Miles, is he had this longing that he didn't know how to fill. And all movies are best when the protagonist and the antagonist are mirrors of each other.
And his growth is just phenomenal. I mean, at first
Yeah, just wait for the next one.
Yeah,
He's going to get really big.
he starts, he's a dork and so goofy, but then he grows in menace as
Yes, as we all do.
When we announced that the Spot was the villain at Annecy 2 Annecies ago, it was like a big reveal. We were like, the villain is the Spot, and the whole audience started laughing. And we were like, we're serious. Like they thought we were joking because of the character's history, but it worked perfectly if you're going to have a multiversal story.
How difficult was it? Challenging to calibrate that evolution of
Very.
For sure.
Yeah, I must say, that was probably one of the biggest challenges on the movie until the very end, was getting Spot's story right. Because he was a challenging character.
And until it was fully animated and rendered him at the end when he's terrifying looking, when you're seeing it in storyboards, you're like, it doesn't have the effect that it has when it's so beautifully done. You're like, oh, wow, that's somebody I don't know how to defeat that person now. And that it wasn't really till the end that it started to actually work.
It was good to run Jason Schwartzman's voice through a filter, to hear like terrifying Jason Schwartzman, who's not usually an actor people think of and run and hide.
But it's emblematic of what we're trying to do every dimension of the movie, which is like question the assumptions that we bring to these kinds of pictures. Like what if the formidable, like the big guy you've got to face at the end, sucks. And it was so fun to write and imagine Jason doing that part, because Jason is such an incredible, he wants to connect with you when he talks to you. He's like, tell me about yourself. And so what a funny fight to have with a villain who just wanted to connect with you the entire time. Yeah. And that was such a smart idea that Jason brought to that role that informed the whole picture, which is everybody really wants to be seen and included. Miles wants that, and Spot wants that. And it's one of the things that Dave Callahan, who wrote the screenplay with us, was really hell-bent on. He's like, these two characters have to have the same problem. They just have to answer it in different ways.
I love to break down, if you guys indulge me, the different worlds and the influences and the design, because each world could be its own movie. And the fact that you guys did so many universes. Justin, can you start telling us about Gwen's world and Earth 65 and the mood ring and the Nirvana look?
Sure. I mean, that was such a fun, very collaborative and expressive journey for all of us on making the movie. But it started with just the story of this girl who had couldn't really express herself to her father, and whose emotions were all pent up, and she was had all this built up things that she wished she could say to her father. So we thought, when we looked at her comic books, there was her actual comic books, we saw there was this beautiful artwork that we thought that inspired us of what if the artwork looked like her comics, but what if also the things she couldn't say, what if the world could say it for her? What if the world could actually respond to this dialogue that she couldn't have with her father, with the audience? And so, even that scene where her father pulls a gun on her, right? And and her father looks angry, so it's red behind her, and she's scared, so it's blue behind her. But then as their conversation breaks down, because her father, she says, "It's me," and he can't believe it. He starts to shrink back, and he turns blue because he's going cold and distant, and she's getting angrier that he's not reaching like, and communicating towards her. So this idea that we could do that, and then it gets red behind her. You know, those kinds of things that we were able to do, and had an amazing team of artists who were able to take not just technology, but we were insistent that comic books are an art form made by people. And we were insistent that what was kind of missing for us was the handprint and the fingerprints of actual artists pushing paint, actually like holding pencils and like reminding people of the tactile quality of these things and letting you feel them. Because there's such a human quality to those materials that and these emotions we're dealing with are so human, and getting to express those and let those live on screen.
Well, our production designer, Patrick O'Keefe, his fingerprints are literally in the movie. Right. And the reason that's there is that this movie is a tremendous accomplishment of visual effects. Every pixel is a visual effect. This is not an exaggeration, the biggest and most ambitious animated film that has ever been attempted. And the reason you guys like it is because the artists who made this film were trying to use machines to bring you closer to the artists, not to distance you from it, not to like show out, but to make the film more human.
But I couldn't help to watch the film and think I'm watching this indie art house film on steroids.
The fact that we got away with that as a major motion picture is the thing I'm most proud of.
It is definitely the year of the weird art house film that is a hit. Yeah. It's like us and Oppenheimer. Yeah. Somehow people went to see these films. It's incredible.
It was funny too, like some of the most difficult, like, are we going to be able to do this? Because we're all fans of art as well. You know, obviously 2099's world, the influence is, you see a lot of Sid Mead in the influence of that world. The world of Mumbattan, if you're into Indrigel comic books, that was like a tremendous impact. But early on in the film, where Gwen is fighting with the Vulture in the Guggenheim, and the joke that we pulled it out and put it back in because we thought we were going to get in trouble, was saying, you call this art, and having him cut the head off of one of Jeff Koontz's balloon animals. And we were like, legal doesn't know if that's going to work. And it took us so long to like go to Jeff Koons and be like, look, dude, we're going to totally crack a joke and fuck up your art.
What's so funny is like Jeff, who is a huge fan of the first movie, and in fact, the reason we made any of these movies in the first place, because he had a retrospective it wasn't at the Guggenheim, it was at the Whitney. Right. The Guggenheim is like a cooler shape. And it's another dimension. So in that exhibit, you know, it's full of him chopping and screwing like works of the past, particularly this chrome bust of Louis XVI that is in the movie. Gwen looks at it and says, "Oh, look, it's your cousin."
Yeah.
And that was really important to us because, like, that idea that you can take something that's been done already and turn it into something entirely new by bringing your personality and a little bit of playfulness to it is like, that's the reason any of us do anything. And so there's a reason the movie starts in like an art exhibit, and it starts with Jeff Koons. And Jeff was like, you can use my art, but I want people to know what the inside of one of the dogs looks like, because we put so much energy into the inside of the dog. Like, we polish it. It's like beautiful in there. And we were like, we got you, bro. But is it cool if inside there's 10,000 other little dogs?
Yeah. I also love that we like almost killed people with a fake Calder sculpture, because I have such disdain for Calder stuff. It's so ubiquitous. And I was just like, yeah, this thing is just a menace. And it became a physical menace in the Guggenheim scene.
Kemp, in Earth 1928, you alluded to the Sid Mead influence, Blade Runner, Tron and stuff, but also I love the fact that it's Miguel O'Hara who says the future is written, but then the lines of his drawing, they're not finished. They're pencil drawings. I mean, can you talk about that?
That was for you, Kemp. That was good.
You or Justin?
Yeah, I want Justin to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of nailed it. And that was like a really good breakdown. Yeah, actually, when we first thought of Miguel and we were first developing him, both on the page and visually, we thought about this guy who was trying to hold everything together himself and was trying to present like this apex version of a spider person, of a hero. But then underneath that, how all of that was actually kind of unraveling and was actually an unfinished thing that he couldn't quite catch up to and couldn't quite even define himself. And the idea that his world was constantly a reflection of that his world is when you see it up close, there's detail, but as the faster you move through it, the more it breaks down, and it can't quite keep up with the image that it's trying to present. And that's that concept art stuff that Sid Mead inspired us, and this idea, we even with our technology and with our artists, we were able to actually, and we did this for every world actually, we would think about even things like, we would challenge even the idea of depth of field, right? And we would challenge camera lenses, and what if there isn't camera focus? What if the further away something is in Miguel's world, it's like the illustration board. And then as it comes forward, it's the blue pencil. And then on top of that is the graphite. And then on top of that is the ink. And then they start putting paint into it. And if you actually look, we would actually use that sometimes as a rack focus in the film, where you would actually see the drawing and the elements of his world, the elements of his drawings, the illusion of the world that he's presenting to the world would actually deconstruct in front of you and in front of Miles as he's witnessing, and as his character, as he's going through this growth and realizing the lie that's being presented to him, he starts to see it unfold and deconstruct.
Miguel is saying the future is written.
Right.
And Miles is like, no, it's not. Nothing is written, right? That you guys are film fans. That's Lawrence of Arabia. And it's the thing we said to ourselves all the time. This is a movie about nothing is written. And so that's why the further away you get from Miguel, the more his world is unfinished. Because it's the central joke that is constantly, no matter how hard he tries to assert, that it is defined. It's obviously not.
You guys can see why this takes 5 years.
Right. Just to get through the conversation, we're all like ents. But there is computer code that has to get written in order to express that nothing is written.
Justin, how crazy for you guys the sign was that when Miles goes to the other verses, he still designed the way that in his the Band-Aid dots continue when he goes to the other universes.
I think it was we actually did a lot of talking about this early on, should they retain their look, should they not? But I think ultimately the proposition we came to really was a powerful statement for us that we wanted to make, is that it's actually our differences and seeing those differences together and live together on screen, that one character's style could be Spider-Punk and another character could be Gwen and another character could be Miles, and actually seeing Miles travel across that, and when you see them all together and you see how it's actually all their differences that actually make them even stronger as a group and as a story, and that I think that ultimately is why we decided to keep that.
In the first movie, it was about these characters had come the Spider-Ham looks like a cartoon, and Penny looks like an anime character, and Noir's obviously still in black and white, so they're it's the visual of everybody next to each other that shouldn't work together. They're still affected by the light of the universe that they're in, so that sort of brings them together in a slight way, so they don't feel like something broke the screen. But that collision between things that shouldn't be together, being together is part of the fun of the whole thing.
And that it is a kind of harmoniousness, right? That everybody brings their distinct selves to something, and that feels like a whole. And the fact that there are differences is actually beautiful to look at.
It's actually one of my favorite shots. One of my favorite shots in the whole film is in Mumbattan when they're about to rescue everyone. And there's a brief moment where you have you know, Miles, Gwen, Pav, and Punk all kind of like in one shot. And the first time I remember we saw that shot fully rendered, I was like, oh, this is so gorgeous, because they're all in different styles. Other than Pav, none of them belong, but it just feels like they all belong.
It makes
in
my
this
heart
moment.
flutter when
Yeah,
I
mine too.
see them all in one frame.
Yeah, it's a great shot.
Amy, Gwen is a badass, but then you also introduce Jessica Drew, and she's pregnant. You know, can
Yeah,
you
isn't
tell
that
us
great?
about that representation of badass women?
Well, women are badasses. Come on. Everything is represented in this movie. You know, and Jessica Drew, the way that these guys rendered her, I thought was really brilliant and something that you've never seen before. Plus, she's on a motorcycle.
She's super cool.
And she's
pregnant.
super cool. Yeah, yeah, I know. It's great.
Everybody in the movie is dealing with a different stage of parenthood. You know, there's a lot about parents and children and the evolution of how your relationship with a young child is to when your kid gets older and you have to sort of let them go and make their own mistakes. So, you know, you've got a pregnant person, you've got Peter B, who's got a little baby, you've got Miles with his parents, Gwen with her dad. Everybody's got a parent-child relationship that's slightly different, and we're trying to reflect all the different stages of parenthood.
And I think that's what brings the movie together as a central idea. It's all these characters who are really well developed, who look like the world that they come from, and yet they're all dealing with similar things that are relatable to everyone. I mean, one of the great things about making this movie is that you feel it with your whole self when you're watching it. You know, you feel it completely. It works on some completely cognitive level.
One of the most unexpected, I think, reactions that it made me laugh, at least, because Jess Drew was inspired partially by a run in the comic books where Spider-Woman was pregnant. And I believe it, I forgot, someone asked me at one of the many Q&As, like, so did you feel like you guys were sending a bad message and endangering pregnant women by having, and I kind of was like, wait, are you, like, I didn't even know how to answer the question, because I'm like, man, I really hope that no pregnant women feel compelled after watching this film to hop onto a motorcycle and fight crime, just to give that PSA that we did not mean to endorse putting pregnant women in danger.
Baby on the outside with Peter B, that's fine.
Yes,
On
you
the
got to keep the
inside.
baby in the Bjorn. But yeah.
Who was the sick puppy that gave Baby Mayday the Green Goblin plush toy and the Doc Ock?
That was eagle eye Easter egg
Yeah.
noticing for you.
That was just a fun joke when we were designing it. Like we knew we had to have like baby toys, and the idea that she's also a hero too. Like as a baby, she's being she you know, and Peter can barely contain her. The idea that she's going to be a baby like hero from birth, and that she already has like, I don't know, maybe she's already fought a baby Green Goblin. I mean, I like
Are
to
you
think
guys
that there's a
aware of
whole
all
history
the-
there.
All the Easter eggs, are you guys aware of all?
Yes.
We look at every dang frame of this for 5 years.
I'm responsible for Mayday's crochet knit cap, which got me into a lot of trouble with the crew because the character was designed already. And it was like, I really think she needs to have a crochet knit cap, guys, because my daughter used to work at Comic-Con for years, and I was like, oh man, I want to see some cosplay of babies with a knit cap on. And it's been great seeing so many people with the Mayday crochet knit cap since this film has come
And when
out.
he says trouble with the crew, it's like, hey, I have this really cool idea, and everybody went, oh, that's a good idea. Okay, we'll do it. That's about how much trouble. We had a crew of people who were like excited every day to come and hear like how we could make this movie even better and more special and more unique. And I think a lot of those Easter eggs that you're talking about actually came from the 1,000 people who actually worked on it. And they surprised us the entire time we were making it. We're going over every frame with a fine-tooth comb, and then we go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
what's this? And it was
I didn't know
it was
I
actually
in
a
the movie.
joy.
They built me,
There were
Justin,
some
and Joaquin into the film.
surprises.
Put you in the
They put us in the movie and didn't tell us. So we were me, Justin, and Joaquin. I was kind of shocked to be like, wait a minute, that's me. So
That's great.
I mean, it is a huge undertaking where everybody, the 1,000 people are all artists and filmmakers. We've got like incredible Daniel Pemberton's incredible score and the soundtrack from Metro Boomin were like a huge part of this movie. And you know, the editing, that people don't understand what an editor of an animated film does. They're like, there's no coverage. How are you editing? There's so much editing that's done in this film.
Yeah, you start with the edit. Before we make anything, we edit the film, which means like literally it's the biggest Avid project ever created. It's an order of magnitude bigger and needs that much more memory and processing power than anything else most animated movies are. And like the amount of times we crash the Avid and have to call them to be like, come fix this thing. It's because like for 3 years, they're like cutting together tons of drawings, tons of storyboards, bringing in the footage, every iteration of the footage, plus like reams of dialogue.
The like the ingenuity of the sound design team and like what is the portal gonna sound like? What is this weird mechanical futuristic spider go home machine gonna sound like? And having to create sort of iconic sounds that no one's ever heard before.
Each character has a different thwip.
Believe it or not.
Like
yes.
and Miles's thwip from the first movie is aged up in this movie to reflect his increased maturity.
His growth
I
spurt.
think
It's the level of like detail. It's the same thing as
Yeah.
like Jeff Koons like polishing the inside of a
Yeah.
dog.
And I think the spider, like it was like Jeff Roubaix, who is our incredible sound designer. I think he like the mechanical spider in the Go Home machine. He said he was taking a saxophone
Yeah,
and like holding it next to a microphone with some weird filter on it and going past it.
Yeah, he took a bass sax and would like run past a microphone, back and forth, and that made the sound of.
I mean, it's incredible how much artistry you don't actually even realize. It's not a computer generating that. It's actually, again, it's a person like pushing air through a saxophone and actually moving something through space and interacting and designing something custom. It's brilliant to work with
Trying
this many.
something weird, behaving like an artist, or being playful like a kid with the materials instead of doing something. The whole movie's about not doing it the way it's supposed to be done.
Right. Nobody was on here just collecting a paycheck. Everyone was trying to innovate.
Well, we can't wait for the sequel, gang, and
Five
hopefully,
more years.
and hopefully
We'll be
you'll
back.
hopefully you'll be back. Thank you for being
you.
here, gang.
Thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
so
Thank you so
much.
much,
Thank you very much.